Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores. Breaking news, and I had to pull out the evil Adam Peters smile for this one, man. But the Washington Commanders have traded wide receiver, former first-round pick wide receiver Jahan Dotson to division rival Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, we got to look at this from every angle possible. Who won the trade and why? I'm going to give both sides of the coin for this one. Is Brandon Aiyuk just automatically on the way? Is this like a precursor to a bigger move on the way afterwards? Did this team just straight up hate Jahan Dotson? Are the attitude concerns a real thing from the rumors that we've been hearing for the past few days? And what is this current wide receiver depth looking like right now? With Jahan Dotson gone, is it time to panic? But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content, man. Like I said, I'm keeping y'all updated on any and every and little thing that the Commanders have going on, whether it's rumors, reports, pure facts, whatever. I got y'all. We already did the video breaking down how they traded for K York, and we also had another 4 additions plus 4 other cuts as well. So we're gonna keep y'all updated with everything going on with the Commanders, every little move that happens, everything. I got y'all. And even after the 2 videos, including this one that I've already put out today, because you're watching this one now, I'm still coming out with a breakdown of what happened in training camp later on tonight, from what happened in practice today, Thursday, August 22nd. So stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. Alright, so first off, let's just start with what happened, man. Let's just start from the very beginning. Let's go back to Genesis, man. Apparently, wide receiver Jahan Dotson was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, and ultimately, we received a 2025 third-round pick and also 2 7th-round picks of the same 2025 draft, while the Eagles get Jahan Dotson plus a 2025 5th-round pick. And that 5th-round pick is probably what kind of threw me like a loop for a loop a little bit. Like, dang, I mean, we had to give them a 5th-round pick to get rid of Jahan Dotson, and we didn't get at least a 2nd back. But I mean, at least we got back a 3rd. But still, man, shouts out to Mike Garafolo for pointing this out as well. The Giants and the Cowboys just made a trade recently. Now the Eagles and the Commanders have added, as well as the NFC East just keeps willing and dealing within one another. And that's really interesting too. We have a lot of inter-division trades going on, a lot of moves just in general, even just relating back to the Commanders and Eagles specifically. Shouts out to Adam Schefter for pointing this out. And you remember this. This is how we got Mike Sanford still in those guys. This marks the 2nd time in recent months that Philadelphia and Washington have even made a trade. The Eagles traded up with the Commanders in April's draft to land Cooper DeJean, and now they've traded with Washington for Jahan Dotson. Remember, that's how we ended up with Mike Sanford still, and I believe Ben Sinnott as well when we traded back, and we also received additional draft capital and things like that. It gets kind of complicated once you start to go further down the road, but yeah, man, we're not afraid to trade with the Eagles, I guess. Maybe Adam Peters doesn't have that hate for the Eagles just because maybe he just got here. I don't know. Maybe like 10 years down the line, maybe he wouldn't be willing to do a trade like this. Or maybe he's just all about business. What can I do to make this team better? And that's all that matters. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, whoever. And I don't care if it's somebody in the NFC, unless maybe it's like a big time player. Like, say if it was like Terry McLaurin and Jonathan Allen, then maybe he would account for the fact that, okay, maybe I don't want to go against this guy twice a year. But with Jahan Dotson, he's probably like, man, Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St. Juste, Mike Sanford, still somebody can cover him 2 times a year. We ain't worried about that, man. We're just trying to get this draft capital and build towards the future. Shouts out to Brett Coleman, too, for tweeting this. He said, after the rookie year that Dotson had, I got to say I'm really surprised that his career has gone this way since then. And that's a good point, man. I mean, the flashes he was showing in that rookie season, I was very excited about his future. If you would have told me 2 years ago that we would have ended up trading Jahan Dotson away by 2024, I would have been shocked. I mean, the only reason I could have seen that it could have been a possibility is that we included him in a trade for like a bigger receiver, like a Brandon Aiyuk straight up. Now, we're going to talk about it later in this video. Maybe instead of going that way, like a 3-team trade or whatever, we just went ahead and got our 3rd round pick for Jahan Dotson from the Eagles. And then we packaged that 3rd round pick to include along with another pick, maybe like a 2nd rounder, maybe an additional player, whoever, to go get Brandon Aiyuk from the 49ers, whoever. You know what I'm saying? But either way, my point is, I thought he was going to ball out. Remember his rookie season at the beginning of it, before he got hurt, he and Stephon Diggs were leading the NFL in receiving touchdowns as a rookie. I think it was only like the first 3 or 4 weeks, but still, like, it was him and Stephon Diggs, and that's it. Like, including tight ends, running backs, anybody that can catch touchdown passes. He and Stephon Diggs were tied for the most in the NFL at a certain point. I think it was like 4 or 6. It was very early in the season, but still, you saw the flashes. Then he got hurt, and then when he came back, Taylor Heineke just, I mean, I guess they lost chemistry. It took him a while to get back on his feet and get things going. But then by the time we ended the season, you saw like a stretch of games where it was like, okay, Jahan Dotson is ready to come back, and look how he looked those first few weeks. And then last year just ended up being a dud. But I was just like, man, I feel like I can believe in that first year more than I can believe in that second year. I'm willing to blame a lot of that on Eric Bieniemy, the offensive line, Sam Howell, whatever. Now, granted, when you go look at the all 22 film, it's not like he was always open like people were saying he was. Like, a lot of people just completely placed all of the blame on everybody but Jahan Dotson. Now, Jahan Dotson deserved his share fair blame, because there were times where maybe Sam Howell didn't get the ball to him, or the offensive line didn't give Sam Howell enough time to get the ball to him, or Eric Bieniemy play calling, play design didn't work out. But there were also times where Jahan Dotson just flat out was not open, and I mean, even sometimes where Sam Howell did a good job throwing the ball to him and he just didn't catch it. So there were just a lot of situations, a lot of blame to go around. But still, I feel like this is a guy whose talent, I still think he could be a good player in this league, even with him now in the Eagles. I'm not even a big Jahan Dotson fan. We're going to talk about this later in the video, especially when we're breaking down Ron Rivera's terrible draft pick history while being our head coach here for 4 years. You know we got to address that. That's a whole section in this video. We have different sections of the video. A whole section is dedicated to just that alone. But y'all know me, man. I'm the biggest George Pickens fan in this fan base. I'm a diehard Georgia Bulldog fan. So y'all know going into that draft, before we even took Jahan Dotson, I was screaming, pleading for them to take George Pickens, even in the first round, let alone you potentially could have even taken a player at a different position, like Kyle Hamilton in the first round at safety, and then still potentially get George Pickens in the second or something like that. But even then, I'm not the biggest Jahan Dotson fan, but I still feel like he has some talent. You've seen the flashes. The consistency is the problem, but it's not like he doesn't have it in him at all. But we're going to dive into why he's such a terrible fit for this team, on and off the field wise. That's another section of this video. We'll get there though. But it's also funny too, because Dan Quinn did a pretty good job of like trying to keep the drama around this situation to a minimum. I mean, not a lot of us really expected this trade to happen, but his poker face was pretty terrible. Like, I mean, you could just kind of tell he just didn't really like this guy. He tried his best to talk him up and say that he's still competing, but he just came out and flat out said, we're still looking for a wide receiver 2 right now, just a couple of weeks ago. And I knew that Jahan Dotson wasn't having like the best of training camps, but Dan Quinn literally just straight up said last week that we're still looking for a wide receiver 2 on this team. And that was like obviously a call out at Jahan Dotson, like, hey man, it's time to, hey, move it or lose it, man. It's time to step up now, or you're now we know it seems like the ultimatum was step it up or we trade you. Back then, it seemed like step it up or you're going to go further down this depth chart. Now, going back and looking at that whole Dan Quinn press conference, it's like, oh, okay. That man was calling him out and telling him, hey, you better get it together before we trade you. And what happened? I'm guessing he didn't get it together, and I'm guessing that that's why he ended up getting traded. But hey, man, I just didn't necessarily see Jahan getting traded in the realm of possibilities, honestly, in my opinion, like, especially this soon, more than anything else. Now, trading him right before the trade deadline, I could easily see that, especially depending on what season he could have had up to that point. But trading him before Jaden Daniels could even throw a single pass to him in the regular season is pretty wild, man. But clearly, he's not the fit that they're looking for. Again, we're going to dive into that at a certain point in this video. Stay tuned for that, because it's not just on the field wise, not just schematically, but it's also off the field wise. Again, we're going to get to that. Shouts out to Nikki Javala because she pointed out the fact that the Commanders have been getting offers for Jahan Dotson from several different teams in the recent days, which is really interesting. So that means that I'm guessing if you're willing to trade him to a division rival, that had to have been the best value we can get for him in return. So for those of y'all that are saying that we could have done better, I'm pretty sure if Adam Peters could have gotten even the slightest bit more value in return for Jahan Dotson, he would have done it to at the very least avoid trading them within the division. But like I said earlier, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, Joey Jr., and all of those guys are probably like, man, we're not worried about him. He can go to the Eagles. We'll play him twice a year. We'll shut him down. We're not even worried about that. That's pretty much what you're saying when you trade a guy within a division, especially at a position like receiver. But Nikki Javala also added that he played more than 30 snaps in the preseason opener, and Dan Quinn said ahead of the Miami game that the wide receiver 2 job was open. These are all very important parts of this whole situation. He was out there that first preseason game against the Jets more than any other wide receiver on this team. I think more than any other starter on this team. So you could tell that they were just like, man, please just show us something. Please go out there and just give us any reason to not trade you. Looking back now, it's like, man, they were throwing him out there like, man, we're thinking about trading you. They probably didn't tell him this straight up, but in the back of their minds, they're like, we need to give this guy as many opportunities as possible to convince us not to trade him, basically. And apparently he didn't do that. Shouts out to my boy Mike Hall of the Burgundy Podcast. I thought this tweet was hilarious. He said, my last 4 jerseys that I bought: 2012 RG3 flamed out after his rookie year, 2016 Dotson bust, like Dotson, Josh Dotson, and then 2020 Gibson. Never matched rookie year production, even though I still believe in Antonio Gibson's potential, especially with him now on the Patriots, potentially getting a bigger opportunity there than he would have gotten here. And then 2022 Dotson, good rookie year, and now we are here. He said, I'm gonna stop buying jerseys, especially for rookies, because they seem to fall all the way off when I do. Hey man, Michael, I would appreciate it if you stop jinxing us, man. I ain't gonna lie, you need to chill out, dude. Wait on that Jaden Daniels jersey, please. Or maybe just never consider getting one. Maybe make one at home. Maybe that's the way you fix the curse. You make the jersey instead of buying the jersey. I don't know, but you're scaring me right now. But now let's move on to the next section of the video and explain why the Eagles did this, why the Eagles feel like they won this trade, why are the Eagles happy. But we also have a different angle to it, to where maybe the Eagles did not win this trade. Maybe the Commanders were smart about this situation. We're going to dive into that as well, but let's start with the Eagles side of things. First of all, Jahan Dotson versus the Eagles last season, 2023, in what was considered a very down year for him. Week 4, 4 receptions, 27 yards and a touchdown as time expired to force overtime. So that was a very clutch play for him and definitely struck fear in the Eagles' hearts. And then week 8, he had 8 receptions, 108 yards and a touchdown. So the Eagles clearly saw his potential firsthand. Like, they experienced it up front. Hey, yo, we can't cover this guy, especially week 8 or when we needed to the most in week 4. So that's probably why they went ahead and got him, man. Shouts out to Greg Rosenthal, because he tweeted back on August 16th, the more the Commanders coaches talk, the more I wonder if Jahan Dotson is even on their week 1 roster. And of course, a lot of people were getting after him in the comment section and saying, duh, he will, obviously. Why would you stir up Jahan Dotson trade rumors? And then now, today, he quote tweeted it and said, should have known Howie, I love me some distressed assets Roseman, was the answer here. It makes way too much sense, man. Shouts out to Bill Barnwell for pointing this out. With wide receivers getting more and more expensive, I mean, these guys out here making quarterback money now, y'all. You seen the contract that, I think it was Justin Jefferson most recently, Amon-Ra St. Brown, what Brandon Aiyuk is asking for? Golly. But to his point, we're seeing teams take shots on highly picked receivers who haven't broken out as a second draft philosophy. Basically, Elijah Moore to Cleveland, Kadarius Toney in Kansas City, given that the cost of paying them is just so low at this point. So basically, they're looking for diamonds in the rough. They were highly touted coming out of the draft. Maybe things haven't worked out within their first couple of years. Let's trade for them while they're still in there. We'll have like a year or 2 left at least in their rookie contracts, and see if we can find that potential that a lot of us felt like they had coming out of the draft. Maybe the Eagles were interested in drafting him in that draft, but I mean, we just took him in the first round, and I feel like most people did not expect Jahan Dotson to go in the first round, including me. I'm not gonna lie. When we took him, I was like, okay, I mean, I guess, I'm Mr. Glass Half Full. I'm gonna try to rationalize everything, but I did not believe Jahan Dotson to be a first round pick leading up to the draft. Shouts out to Matt Miller for also pointing this out. He said, this is a really interesting trade for Philly. Dotson seemingly fell out of favor in Washington, but has deep speed and flashed vertically at times. And Philly wide receiver core is super talented, so Dotson as a wide receiver 3 in the slot is going to be fun, and that's a great situation for him. I mean, shouts out to Josh Norris for pointing this out. Jahan Dotson going from a rotational wide receiver 2 in an offense projected to have the 25th most points in the league versus being a wide receiver 3 in an offense that's projected to have the 10th most projected points. And so he has the meme where it's like, oh, I'm down, but wait a minute, that's actually not that bad. So from Jahan Dotson's point of view, this is definitely a win for him, because the Commanders clearly did not like him again. And I'm not just talking about on the field, I'm talking about off the field. We're going to talk about that in one of the later sections of this video. But even just the fact that he could go to the Eagles, he's going to a winning franchise, and a proven winning franchise recently. It's going to a good offense setup. And I mean, at best, at the very, very best case scenario, he reaches his ceiling. At best, he'll be wide receiver 3. So that means he will not get as much of an attention from defenses, even though here he wasn't getting it either way yet. But at least when he goes over there, he knows for a fact he won't get any extra attention. He could just do his thing working out of the slot. But Hayden Hinks also has another view on this, which is a good point. He basically feels like Jahan may not work out due to NFL history with situations like this. He said, we'll see if JD can stay on his feet against press, because that's been one of his biggest problems. He's really small. He's been getting beat up since basically getting to the NFL level. That's why he's restricted to the slot. But he said that we'll see if JD can even stay on his feet against press and after the catch as a very low volume wide receiver number 3. I'd view this as bad news for him, because first rounders traded this early in their rookie contracts, early in their careers, tend to not pan out, just in general. So that's an opposing point of view there, where maybe the Commanders dodged the bullet. Maybe the Eagles are basically buying into a situation that's set up for failure just based off of history. Shouts out to @We Want Dallas for pointing out the fact that Eagles receivers not named AJ Brown and Devonta Smith combined for 40 catches and 422 yards last year. Since then, they've given Brown and Smith each big extensions and spent money on Saquon as well, who's also going to catch the ball out of the backfield. Hard to see massive opportunities for a wide receiver 3 on that team unless the offense changes significantly, and that is a great point as well. So it's not like Jahan Dotson, this is obviously a great situation for him, because granted, he is going to a better offense, but the downside of going to a better offense, why is that offense already considered, at least widely assumed to be projected better than ours? Because they already have other great weapons on there. So if you're talking about potentially going to a winning franchise, okay, the Eagles, yes. But if you're talking about going to the franchise where you can go out there and make plays, you can put up great stats and potentially get a big-time contract when your rookie contract ends, you were better off being here, because there are more opportunities for you here. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith already were eating up way too many receptions for you to be as successful as you'd hope from last year. Again, out of all of the other receivers outside of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith last year, they had 40 catches and 422 yards total out of every receiver other than those two guys. That is insane. And then they added Saquon Barkley on top of that in the offseason, who's also going to take away targets from you, not only in the passing game, but by the fact that they're going to want to run the ball more, because they just spent all of that money on Saquon, and Saquon's really talented. So if you're talking about Jahan Dotson as an individual, his chances of leaving a legacy in the NFL and making as much money as he possibly can, this trade is actually really bad for him. He would have been better off being here if he wanted as many opportunities as he can to show that he could be a premier wide receiver. But at the same time, shouts out to Mitch Tisler, because I was thinking this too. I was like, didn't we get Olamide Zaccheaus from the Eagles? They just let him walk. We picked him up as a free agent, didn't have to trade for him. Meanwhile, we had to trade Jahan Dotson to them. Check this out. He said, are the Eagles playing chess right here? They let Olamide Zaccheaus walk, who signed with the Commanders, who's play in preseason at least in part allowed the Commanders to make the Jahan Dotson situation even happen, to make Jahan Dotson available. And then he goes to the Eagles. So was Olamide Zaccheaus being a double agent? They sent him over here as a free agent, and then let him ball out in the preseason and let us believe in him. Then we trade away Jahan Dotson. Regular season comes. Olamide looks exactly who the Eagles thought he would be, which is not good, which is why they let him walk in the first place. I mean, they could be playing chess while we're playing checkers, but at the same time, Olamide has actually literally just straight up outplayed Jahan Dotson this summer. Like, just straight up, like 1v1, Olamide has been the better receiver this summer, and I feel like that's not even really up for debate. So did we actually just end up finessing them, if you think about it? Because if Olamide ends up being good, which I'm not betting any money on at all, me personally, but just say if he does, that would be us getting the better player for free through free agency, rather than the Eagles trading away draft picks for the lesser of the two receivers. I mean, I'm joking around, but for real though, only time will tell who actually for real won this trade. Speaking of winning the trade, you know Walter Football was on it, and overall he gave the Eagles an A- for the trade. He gave us a B+. That was higher than what I expected walking into his website to see what he had to say. He said, Commanders wise, as for the Redskins, it's nice that they were able to upgrade a mid-round pick for a player they did not want anymore. I question them helping a division rival, but it's not like they were going to finish ahead of the Eagles in the standings anytime soon anyway. I mean, I guess he's kind of downplaying us and just assuming that we're pretty much not necessarily tanking on this season, but we don't have high hopes. I would argue against that and say, hey man, we still have a chance to go out there and make some noise. Stop sleeping on us. I think he's underestimating how much we just actually didn't really like Jahan Dotson. He's seeing it as maybe we did like Jahan Dotson, but we're just mortgaging the current season, the now, for the future. We're trying to, build towards the future. We're willing to sacrifice 2024 for the betterment of 2025 and beyond. But no, I think it's more so just they just didn't like Jahan Dotson. Again, we're about to get to that right now, as a matter of fact. I mean, it really seems like they did not like that guy. I mean, just based off of just simply the trade value that we got in return, they almost basically gave that guy away. I mean, you got a 3rd round pick in return, but you also had to give up a 5th round pick to do so. You got 2 7s, but they already had 4 of them, and they just gave you 2 of the 4 they had. We're going to dive into that towards the end of the video. They already had a couple of 3rds. They said, here, take 1 of them. We still got another 1 left. And then the same thing with the 7s. We'll get there, though. But clearly the Eagles weren't really stressing these draft picks. But again, like I said earlier, if multiple teams had offers, not even just calling, but offers, this must have been the best one. I'm just assuming, because you traded them within the division. And if you're willing to do that, then that had to have been the best offer on the table, which means I guess this entire league doesn't view Jahan Dotson like a lot of people in this fan base probably do. They're definitely not as high on him as a lot of people, Commanders fans, may be. But now let's talk about the fact that they probably hated this guy. Now, of course, my first thought after I saw the trade, and I wasn't even at home when I saw it, I was like, whoa. And I was just at a loss of words. I didn't even have any initial analysis the first 5 seconds. I mean, my jaw just dropped. I was like, wait a minute. What just happened? But immediately after that, the first thing I thought was, man, they really hated that guy. I mean, that was my immediate thought after that. Shouts out to Ari Marov at My Sports Update, because he just 5 hours ago, he said, taking a look at some potential trade candidates, including a few backup quarterbacks, veteran running backs, and a couple of former first-round picks. And he even mentioned Jahan Dotson in his video. So then after the trade, he just put this out this morning before the trade. After the trade, he quote tweeted it and said, Jahan Dotson was mentioned in this video from earlier today on at NFL Spotlight. Something has been fishy in Washington with Dotson, and it reached a point where they were willing to trade him within the division to Philadelphia just to get rid of him. That's a good point. And remember, I know a lot of people were saying that I was clickbaiting, I was stirring up drama that wasn't there, but now look, remember when I did the video talking about B. Mitch calling out a wide receiver, talking about how he was pouting and sulking, he was acting entitled, and that whatever receiver this was basically showing like really bad body language as a reaction to the Martavis Bryant trade of signing. The fact that we signed him, that guy didn't step up and be like, okay, I need to get on point because my job is threatened. No, he started to just basically pout and act like an entitled child that was like, man, you're gonna go and sign this guy? Now I'm not even about to try my hardest because it seems like y'all already don't like me and I'm gonna be a victim and things like that. That's how B. Mitch made it out to be. And so I already had Jahan Dotson as my leading candidate there, just based off of everything we we've been hearing through training camp from multiple sources, people going to every practice. But now after this trade, I'm very sure that it was him that B. Mitch was calling out that day. Because again, Jahan Dotson is not that bad for the trade value that we just got in return, talent-wise specifically. If we're just talking about what he can do on a football field, he is not worth the little that we got in that trade value. So it must have been some character stuff and some mental things that they just didn't like about him as well, obviously. Again, so going back, go check out that B. Mitch rant where he was calling out a receiver like the day after, no, literally the morning. We signed Martavis Bryant like at 9 a.m. B. Mitch was already on his radio show by like 11 a.m. just going off about a receiver that like it kind of surprised him a little bit. Like he kind of felt like he was hurt, like he lost trust in the guy. Like, man, I was expecting more of you. You let me down type of rant. It wasn't even really like anger. It was more so just like, man, I was expecting better of you type of rant. It was crazy. But then Logan Paulson in this podcast with Craig Hoffman after the trade happened just now said that Jahan Dotson was not urgent at all. From all of the practices they've been going to, he just hasn't looked like a guy that really wanted it. Like that was ready to compete and like do whatever it took. And Logan Paulson also said in comparison to rookie Luke McCaffrey, who was as urgent as I've ever seen as a rookie, as said by Logan Paulson in that podcast. So to me, this further confirms that it wasn't just his talent as a receiver, it was his attitude and mentality, which is why we're here right now with this situation. This team has been preaching and basically screaming about building a culture where everybody competes no matter what. Even Jonathan Allen and Terry McLaurin, Bobby Wagner, guys like that had to earn their starting roles. It didn't matter who you were, everybody started from step zero, and Jahan Dotson just never took off. He just never really left the starting point like that. He never left with urgency. He never really competed as hard as he could. He just, basically the main thing was he was never giving it 100%. He was just going out there with the I'm a first round pick swag. It'll figure itself out and things like that. And so apparently from multiple sources now, Jahan Dotson was not competing, or at the very least, he wasn't giving it his all. And Logan Paulson said, quote, "It looked like Jahan Dotson was not engaging with the culture like the other receivers were," unquote. And he continued to emphasize that it wasn't necessarily a talent issue, but more so how Jahan Dotson carried himself in practices. Logan Paulson said that this trade was good for both parties as well. Washington is happy because they got value in return for a player that didn't fit. They just didn't want him around at all. Basically, he was a bad egg. And then Jahan also gets a chance to go to a winning improvement team and a fresh start. But again, like I said earlier, I don't know, man. I'm not expecting him to get a lot of targets in this offense based off of what we talked about earlier. But that's not to say that he was not a bad team fit as well. Like, I know we're focusing on the off the field things, attitude, mentality, but that's not to say that we could just skip over the fact that, yeah, maybe he was a bad team fit as far as like talent and scheme and things like that as well. I think his mentality was probably the biggest part, or at the very least a big part as to why he ended up getting traded. But his lack of size and physicality is also an awful fit for how much the Commanders really want to run the ball, man. They want their receivers to be very physical, to be able to beat press and block for runners. Like, we have Jaden Daniels who's going to run at the quarterback position. We have multiple running backs. We plan on using a lot of screens, I'm assuming. And Jahan Dotson, you could argue, may have been the least physical receiver out of it, the very least the top 6 guys on this roster that will make this team. Diami and Terry are excellent blockers. Diami Brown's arguably our best blocker, Terry McLaurin right behind him. And then rookie Luke McCaffrey, like Logan Paulson just mentioned earlier, like I gave you the quote, has been very physical. He even pancaked my dog Tyler Owens on a block in a training camp practice like a couple of weeks ago. So there's flashes there for him as well. And just to go back to the wrong mentality point, even like on top of like the talent as far as blocking goes, I mean, blocking does require some physical traits like strength, size, power, and things like that, of course. But blocking, if anything, in my opinion, is more so just want to. The biggest part of being a consistent blocker, in my opinion, is wanting to be a good blocker and a consistent blocker. Willing to put your body on the line for the benefit of the team and things like that. And it just seems like Jahan Dotson was not that guy. He just wanted to go out there, run routes, and catch passes. That's it. He didn't want to do none of the other work didn't want to put his best foot forward or nothing like that. And to Dan Quinn, that makes his stomach itch. I mean, he can't stomach that. Shouts out to Chris Russell for pointing this out as well. Mentioned this earlier on the other day on the Team 980. I think the final straw for this staff being 1,000% out on Jahan Dotson was a lead block on a slip screen left to Olamide Zaccheaus in Miami. I believe it was the joint practice he's talking about. Apparently, Jahan Dotson was engaged with the lead block and then lost it, and then the play was blown up by the man that beat Jahan Dotson, and that was probably what sealed the deal. That was it. You already don't have the mentality that we want, and then we're trying to utilize a lot of screens, and you have Martavis Bryant in his first day of being signed delivering a great block that allowed Jamison Crowder to get a bunch of yards on the screen, and then you're going to come out here in this Miami Dolphins joint practice. You've already been here for multiple years. You've been here the entire summer since Cliff Kingsbury, Dan Quinn, and all these guys have been here. You know what they want and expect of you, and you still can't block out here and get these screens open, and then you got the play blown up on a guy that's potentially the reason why you're getting released. They're like, okay, well, we got Olamide, we don't necessarily need Jahan. Maybe that was Jahan doing that on purpose to hopefully get Olamide eliminated. Like, hey, go get that guy. I mean, he probably Willie beaming them from Any Given Sunday or something like that. I'm joking, but that's just crazy. And you remember, back in that initial press conference for Adam Peters with Josh Harris sitting next to him, somebody asked that man, Josh Harris, how do you feel about this overall talent of the roster? And that pause felt like it was forever. That guy, as smart as he is, couldn't even think of a lie to make up on the spot about this roster. And Jahan Dotson was probably one of the people that, like, while the roster was flashing before his eyes, all of these players like Logan Thomas and Nick Gates and Charles Leno, Jahan Dotson was probably in that quick slideshow in his head as like, man, I don't know what to tell y'all. And then he tried to butter it up and say something nice and political, but that 7-second pause was crazy. If you want to see it again, here you go.
Adam, David Aldridge with The Athletic. Welcome to DC. I wonder what you think of the current roster.
I believe that there's a few cornerstone pieces in this roster. I believe we have a lot of work to do, and that's just evaluating everybody.
And shouts out to John Ledger for pointing this out. He said the Commanders did pretty well on value here, but number one, the last regime screwed them. Dotson was always overdrafted, in my opinion. I would agree. I thought where we took him in the draft was too high. I would argue he may not even been a first-round pick in the first place. And then number two, they must have been absolutely done with him if they traded him in the division to Philly. And that's one of the biggest parts of this. You really got to hate a guy to not only get that little bit of value back in return, and the fact that other teams were giving you offers out there, so you could have traded them to other teams outside of the division. And then on top of that, again, to trade them to the Eagles, like a team that you have to play twice a year. They really do not like that guy at all. And I know trading within the division is a little crazy. I see why some people maybe panic about that. But for me, I respect and appreciate the fact that Adam Peters, for not overthinking about things like that, like trading them within the division and keeping the main thing, man. Improving your team and building a culture while you're at it. Like, that's the priority. And so these are long-term things that he's focused on, and he's not focused on being eyed in 2023. Like, that's cool and all. Not to say that he's punting on this season, like we've given up on this season, like 2024 is just a wash, but it's clear that he's far more focused on building a Super Bowl contender in the near future and building the right culture here while he's building that winning culture as well. It starts from the inside. It starts from the foundation. Adam Peters is not playing about that. Shouts out to Grant Paulson for pointing this out. He said, I've got to say I'm stunned that the Commanders would give up on Dotson as fast as they did. Should he have been taken where he was? No. Again, first round where he was? No. Is he a fit for Cliff Kingsbury's system? Apparently not. I would agree. But you couldn't find a way to involve him and get him production out of him in any way, especially in a wide receiver room where De'Ami Brown is the number 2 right now. You couldn't use Dotson in some way. Crazy to me, but pretty clear, as we've discussed, that in addition to not being a perfect schematic fit, this staff just did not like how Dotson operated. This is very off the field based as well as on the field too. And again, if you want to think about how this league feels about Jahan Dotson, or more specifically how the Commanders feel about him, the fact that this guy probably has at least like 3 years left of control over his contract if the Eagles were to choose to pick up his 5th-year option. And the Washington still had to include a 5th-round pick to get a 3rd-round pick in return while sending away Jahan Dotson. That should tell you everything you need to know about how much they did not like him. Shouts out to JP Finley because he brings up a good point as well. He said, gotta applaud Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, man. They're taking an L on this trade, but because they want to build their team, their culture, the way that they want to. More important to build what you actually want than pretend something can't change because of draft status. I completely agree. Just because he was drafted in the 1st round does not mean you need to keep forcing the issue. And then also shouts out to @WeWantDallas for saying the fact that the best Washington could get for Dotson was a watered down 3rd in the division says everything you need to know about how the league views him. It's clear football Twitter and media members are higher on him than the actual league is. Now let's talk about who was high on him, way too high on him. Ron Rivera, step up right now. You need to explain yourself. Let's get to it. Is he probably the worst talent evaluator of all time? I literally just did a video on that just like a week or 2 ago. Now we got to revisit it. First of all, just 2022 draft wise, among all of the other great players we could have drafted, Kyle Hamilton and George Pickens were right there. Like I said earlier, maybe Kyle Hamilton in the 1st, George Pickens in the 2nd. Now, granted, I had a little bias there because Kyle Hamilton is from Atlanta and George Pickens is a Georgia dog, so I wanted them bad just off of that alone. But also, they were just great talents, but I was screaming to draft them that draft night leading up to it, even the weeks leading up to it. I just thought that was just too obvious. I mean, it just felt so obvious back then that I don't even feel like I have the right to say I told you so, because I feel like everybody told Rivera so. All of y'all watching this probably told Rivera so before that happened. Had the foresight to be like, you're gonna regret this decision. So instead of taking one of those elite players, they decided to trade back, and the Saints ended up getting Chris Olave, and through that trade we ended up getting Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson, Sam Howell, and Cole Turner. I mean, and I wasn't even necessarily the biggest Chris Olave fan coming out of Ohio State, but in 2 seasons, Chris Olave has 2,165 receiving yards on 159 catches, and he's been hurt, and he still put up those stats, man. And shouts out to Matthew Perez for breaking this all the way down. He said the updated 2022 draft night trade, the Saints got Chris Olave at number 11. That's where we originally were. The Commanders ended up with wide receiver Jahan Dotson, which you traded to Philly for a 3rd and a 7th, and then Brian Robinson, which is, I mean, solid pick. Shouts out to Brian Robinson in the 3rd. I'll take that, I guess. Then Sam Howell traded to Seattle for a pick swap, which Washington then used as a part of a deal to trade down in 2024. And then Cole Turner as well. But you also need to note Washington traded the 120th pick from the Saints and the 189th for the 144th and 150th, which helped them land Howell and Turner. So it's a whole bunch of chaos going on. Even beyond that, he also added to the fact that it was a bit too complicated to get into because Washington packaged it with the number 40, the number 78, which was Seattle's, and the number 152nd for the 50th, 53rd, and 161, which I believe was with the Eagles. That turned into Mike Sanverstill, Ben Sinnott, and safety Dominique Hampton. Technically linebacker Dominique Hampton. You would know why I'm saying that if you've been keeping up with my breakdowns of the preseason games, joint practices, and training camp practices. And also, of course, that was coincidentally a trade with the Eagles as well. So we've been doing a lot of business with the Eagles, and it's kind of been all over the place. But basically, ultimately, through these multiple trades that we've had with the Eagles over the past couple of years, who has won? I don't know. It's ugly. It's an ugly situation. I appreciate having Brian Robinson. I'm happy no matter what it took. We ended up with Mike Sanverstill and Ben Sinnott. But boy, oh boy, it does not look like we won that trade at all when we can have Kyle Hamilton and George Pickens right now. But so basically, in general, if you were drafted by Rivera, my main point is the clock is ticking. Even if you're a 1st round pick, who would have thought that Jamin Davis would have out-survived and lasted longer on this roster than Jahan Dotson? But now looking at Rivera's 1st round picks here and where they are as of today. 2020 1st round pick traded, 2021 1st round pick barely hanging on, 2022 1st round pick traded, 2023 1st round pick barely hanging on. It's a good thing that we didn't allow him to get a 2024 1st round pick, because that, just based on that trend, that guy would have ended up getting traded. And then also Sam Howell, his quarterback, ended up traded as well. We definitely need to emphasize that. So Chase Young now on his 3rd team in 10 months. Jamin Davis, new position, barely trying to make this team, even though I project him to do so, but struggling. Jahan Dotson traded in the division for very little value. And then Emmanuel Forbes trying to bounce back from a bad rookie season. And some people say that he may not even start. Those are your first round picks from Ron Rivera, man. Shouts out to Linnell for pointing this out. Ron Rivera left Dan Quinn an absolute just pile of hot dog water, just pencil shavings to work with, man. He wasted the last 4 first round picks. Chase Young is his best first round pick, and he was the consensus obvious one, and he still didn't work out as well as we hoped. Year after year, he went against the conventional wisdom in the draft, which is the part of this that really irritates me the most. Some of these answers are so obvious. Like Christian Gonzalez, even though I'm still rooting for Emmanuel Forbes, Christian Gonzalez over Emmanuel Forbes seems so obvious. I was just astonished when we didn't take Christian Gonzalez. And then even before then, with the Jahan Dotson situation, George Pickens, Kyle Hamilton, I could list at least double-digit players that we could have taken over Jahan Dotson right there. And Jamison Williams, even though I still believe in his talent, even with the gambling and stuff like that. But, I mean, that was just so obvious, man. Jamin Davis, JOK. Or how about, instead of, like, forcing the issue with linebacker take on in the first round, take another position. You could have gotten JOK potentially in the second round, and then JOK has just flat out been better than Jamin Davis straight up. So even if you took JOK in the first round, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah for the Cleveland Browns, even if you took him in the first round, that would have been better than taking Jamin Davis. And that's another one where, like, all of us fans knew this going into the draft. Like, and then the Commanders just try to outsmart everybody else. Everybody's thinking this, but we're gonna do this because we're geniuses. And then it's just not worked out yet at all, man. And shouts out to Linnell for also pointing out the fact that I don't remember a worse 4-year span with a team with first round picks. I mean, honestly, is there? Shouts out to Nikki Javala. She said the Commanders haven't hit on a first round pick since 2018, and that was a time where we hit on 2, Deron Payne and Montez Sweat. I will argue with both hits. Hopefully Jaden Daniels will be the end of that curse for the Burgundy and Gold, but that wasn't Ron Rivera. 2018 wasn't Ron Rivera with Deron Payne and Montez Sweat. So as soon as Ron Rivera got here, we just started throwing first round picks away. I mean, remember Dwayne Haskins 2019 didn't work out, and then of course Chase Young, Jamin Davis, Jahan Dotson, Emmanuel Forbes. Again, hopefully Jaden Daniels in 2024 breaks that curse. And speaking of Montez Sweat, he saw this trade and tweeted, "Never personal, just business." So, hey, man, I guess he's not a fan of what the Commanders got going on or whatever that cryptic tweet exactly means. But interesting point there. I guess Jahan Dotson's probably somebody that he's still close with, and he hates to see him get traded like that. But now, moving on. What's going on with our wide receiver room? Do we have concerns? Is there an unsung hero of which we're not aware right now on this roster? Should Jaden Daniels be concerned about his wide receiver situation? Because as of right now, our wide receiver core, as far as guys that I feel like are relatively safe to make the team, Terry McLaurin, Olamide Zaccheaus, De'Ami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, and Jamison Crowder. That's it. That is it. I mean, I just refuse to believe that Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and Cliff Kingsbury are okay with going into the regular season with that. And shouts out to Linnell for saying this. He said, "I would not just assume Washington will go all in on Aiyuk. Dotson clearly fell out of favor with his staff. They got value for a guy sliding down the depth chart. That being said, hard to imagine they go into 2024 with this current group. The only question is, how aggressive will they get? Are they shooting for the stars like Brandon Aiyuk's of the world? Or are they just going to bring in a random guy that maybe he could compete and be like a wide receiver 2 or 3 and just add some depth, some solid depth?" I mean, shouts out to Grant Paulson for pointing this out. The catch totals from last season for all of the non-McLaurin Commanders wide receivers that we currently have. You have De'Ami Brown with 12. Olamide Zaccheaus with the Eagles, 10. Luke McCaffrey, a rookie, so 0. Jamison Crowder, 16. Byron Pringle, 14. None of the other 5 wide receivers that we have in camp right now had a catch with us last season, or had a catch period last season on any team. That is scary. I mean, at this rate, Terry McLaurin going to be out there getting double teamed like how the Saints did Calvin Johnson. Y'all seen that picture where they literally had 2 corners lined up right in front of them. You're not getting this ball. And it really feels like it's going to end up being like that, man. Poor Terry. I mean, I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic about the wide receiver depth that we still have, but I mean, he could end up right back in a situation where defenses completely just do everything that they can and utilize all of their resources on stopping him first and foremost, and just allowing anybody else to eat. And that has to be frustrating, man, to think you probably finally got it. But at the same time, this time around, he should at the very least have the best quarterback play he's had in his entire career since being drafted by the Burgundy and Gold. And that should be a big help here. And I'm not trying to dress this up like Jahan was just this proven Pro Bowl level receiver or something. Like, this is just some huge loss that we just had. But that's just one less person that has a chance to be that Robin to Terry McLaurin's Batman. That's just one less guy we have auditioning for that role, basically. And it also sucks to lose a 2022 first round pick player within 2 years, man. Even if he was overdrafted and probably should never have been drafted in the first round in the first place, it still sucks to lose a player with that on their resume. First round pick. You know what I'm saying? Shouts out to Linnell Willingham for pointing this out as well, though. He said Luke McCaffrey in his recent emergence is probably something to keep mind here as well. Still on the surface, it's still an eyebrow raising move, but Luke McCaffrey has been getting better lately. Like the past week or two, Luke McCaffrey has been developing. And then even to add to that point, today in practice, back at 1:37 p.m., so this is well after the trade, Linnell pointed out the fact that Luke McCaffrey was even getting the first crack at the third wide receiver with the first team. When the starters went out there, Luke McCaffrey was the first guy to go out there with Terry McLaurin, and I'm assuming De'Ami Brown was wide receiver too. So, but disclaimer, they do rotate, but Luke McCaffrey got the first look. We'll see what that means. Is this something that maybe we need to believe in? Is Luke McCaffrey the unsung hero? We'll see. But this is great news from not only some of the back-end receivers fighting to make this team, but also guys like Cole Turner, where even though he is in a different position group, when you are on the back end of the roster fighting to be one of the 53 people that make this team on Tuesday, any roster opening is good for you. So even though as a fan base and as a coaching staff right now, we may not be too excited about what we got going on, I know Cole Turner and some of those guys at the bottom of the depth chart, especially in that receiver room, are pretty excited about this situation. Shouts out to Hayden Hinks though, because fantasy football wise, he pointed out the fact that De'Ami Brown is going to play plenty if looking for an undrafted player in round 17 and 18 in your fantasy drafts. Luke McCaffrey likely will be in 3 wide receiver sets only, but that's enough to get drafted late too as well, so be on the lookout for him. Brown saw a screen on the second play last week, for example, and then on a third down conversion as well. So basically, he's giving the heads up to non-Commanders fans, hey, watch out, De'Ami Brown may be the guy that ends up getting a lot of those targets that Jahan Dotson just walked away from by getting traded. And I also want to point this out. De'Ami Brown so far in this preseason has a 91.1 Pro Football Focus grade, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 74 yards, 2 contested catches, and a 118.1 passer rating when targeted. So is De'Ami Brown this unsung hero? Is he finally putting it all together this offseason to be the guy that we hoped he could be as of just a couple of years ago when he was a 3rd round pick? And Chris Sims said he was like arguably the 3rd best receiver in the entire receiving unit of that draft, the receiver class, including Jalen Waddle and I believe Devonta Smith. And I don't know, maybe I'm getting my drafts mixed up, but I remember Chris Sims saying that De'Ami Brown was going to be a really good receiver. He was even higher on him than a lot of us Commanders fans, including me. So maybe Chris Sims's the point in his take, maybe it's coming back around to age like fine wine right now. And even though, again, he's a tight end, just like Cole Turner, but different situation. When throwing to all of the receivers, you throw all of them in one pot, like running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, everything. Just throw them all in one big pot. When you're talking about receiving targets for Jaden Daniels, when you look at it that way, even a guy like Ben Sinnott moves up in the list. I mean, maybe he even has some real fantasy value now. Again, I'm not trying to act like we just lost a Pro Bowl receiver or something like that, but I feel like at the very least, Jahan Dotson was going to get a good amount of targets. Whether he caught him or not, he was going to get targets. And so with him now gone from the regular season, those targets will have to go to other players, and I'm pretty sure a guy like Ben Sinnott will even get just at least a slice of the targets that are now in limbo, just in the air. These proverbial targets that were supposed to go to Jahan Dotson, if you just had to fast forward into the future, that's going to have to get spread out. A guy like Ben Sinnott, maybe another guy to keep your eye on to potentially become a bigger part of the passing game. Now, let's talk about this Brandon Aiyuk situation, because of course, when you trade Jahan Dotson for such little value like that, I mean, one of probably my very next thought after, oh my God, they hate this guy. My very next thought after that was, all right, so is this just like, all right, we'll do whatever it takes to get a 3rd round pick, even if Jahan Dotson's just a part of the deal, but maybe he wasn't even the main part. Maybe the Commanders were more so focused on getting that 3rd round pick so they could flip that along with maybe like our 2nd as well, maybe a player in addition to all of that, and then flip that into Brandon Aiyuk. Who knows? Shouts out to Burgundy Blog. He brought up a good point. He said, almost expecting another trade now. The wide receiver depth chart behind 17 is not season ready. I would argue that is a good point. Jaden Daniels has to be looking around like, man, I want to keep emphasizing, it's not like Jahan Dotson was this Pro Bowl player that we just lost, but still, losing him does not make your wide receiver core better at the very least. Shouts out to @the too. He says, so now that Washington has a serious needed wide receiver, do we just kick the tires on some of the bigger name free agents? Which is a good point. Are we looking at guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, maybe a Hunter Renfrow, maybe a Corey Davis? If you're trying to stay cheap and not go all the way up high for a Brandon Aiyuk, maybe you settle for a guy that's free right now that you don't even have to trade for, that will not cost you a lot of money. I know a lot of these guys are fairly washed up, and to the point that we already signed Martavis Bryant over those other 3 guys that I just named. Maybe they're not even considering those guys in the first place, because we would have signed Corey Davis, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Hunter Renfrow back when we signed Martavis Bryant instead. But also shouts out to Brett Coleman, because even he paid attention to this. He said, wait, what if the Commanders take that extra third and throw it at San Francisco as a sweetener for Brandon Aiyuk? There's a lot of people saying this. B. Mitch said that his spidey senses are tingling right now. He said, quote, I don't think this is over. I have a gut feeling there's going to be something else coming, unquote. Then Linnell, he tweeted, I just got off the phone with a national media member who was suggesting that the Commanders may not be done for the day at wide receiver. So not only are we potentially looking at getting another wide receiver, a big name win, hopefully not somebody like Antonio Brown, but to also say that it may happen today, really interesting. If something happens, I promise you, I will have y'all updated immediately. And shouts out to Real Robinson, because I completely agree with this tweet. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, subscribe to him on YouTube and everything. He reacted to this trade as well, so make sure you go check out his video too. He tweeted, corresponding move definitely coming. May not be the big fish that Washington fans want, but another wide receiver is definitely on the way. I completely agree. I understand the move. Don't matter where you were selected, when new folks run the show now, and if you ain't a fit, you gotta go. That where you were drafted should not play into the role of whether we keep you or not, whether we trade you or not. What have you done for me lately? How good are you right now? Man, because again, you could easily argue that he shouldn't have been a first-round pick in the first place. Now, shouts out to Ryan Fowler, because he pointed out this. He said, unless there have been things occurring behind the scenes, or Washington is looking to make an aggressive move for Brandon Aiyuk, the move of Dotson and inside the East is a huge head scratcher, because Commanders are now once again desperate for talent behind Terry McLaurin, and more so, and they put Jaden Daniels in a tough spot with correlating talent. And a move this late in the summer for an expected core contributor is also extremely eye-opening. So basically, he's saying that, yeah, this does sound like trading for Brandon Aiyuk right now. It's not very likely, because it's so late in the season, and you would just assume that the trades will probably be back-to-back, like a 3-team trade type of situation. You trade Jahan Dotson, Brandon Aiyuk news comes right after. But at the same time, did they really just hate Jahan Dotson that much? Because I also feel like this may be a precursor to a bigger trade soon as well. Even if it isn't Aiyuk, what if it's T. Higgins? Or maybe even CeeDee Lamb. I mean, the Cowboys can't pay him all. Maybe that's the guy that they just give up on, and we can get him for the cheap. Might as well just keep the interdivision trades going at this point. Go ahead and keep that trend going, because I mean, all of the trades between the Giants and the Cowboys, us and the Eagles, we might as well just go ahead and start trading with the Cowboys as well, man. We already took their defensive coordinator and their head and their passing game coordinator, now our defensive coordinator, Joe Wood Jr., and several of their players. We might as well just go ahead and keep that trend going. Go ahead and get CeeDee Lamb if we can't get Aiyuk, right? Now, Grant Paulson said the Dotson trade makes previous lack of interest in Aiyuk trade more interesting to me. I agree. Staff wasn't smitten with Jahan Dotson and clearly had already been considering a future without him. Still didn't have urgency to add to the wide receiver room, though. It must be a lot of faith in Diami and OZ. And I agree. There has to be, half of it has to be maybe they already like what they have in the receiver room, but I feel like the other half is they're still pursuing another receiver, whether it be through trade or whatever. But I feel like you don't risk making this trade if you're not at least somewhat comfortable. No matter how aggressive you want to get with trying to get a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, T. Higgins, or CeeDee Lamb or whoever, you have to at least be somewhat comfortable to put yourself out there in this situation right now where we're in limbo, where we don't have another receiver. Like, we traded away Jahan Dotson, we don't have another receiver automatically coming back in, and just say worst case scenario, we don't end up getting another impactful receiver. So again, even if you are aggressively pursuing a Brandon Aiyuk trade, you have to at least be somewhat comfortable to a certain extent about this receiver core, because just in case, worst case scenario, you don't end up getting anybody else. Now, my last thoughts and interesting points before we get up out of here. First of all, shouts out to Ian Rappaport for pointing this out. Now that 5th round pick that we just gave to the Eagles was the only one that we have. So we don't have a 5th round pick anymore at all. Also, the Eagles had 2 3rd round picks, theirs and Miami's, and the pick is the better of them. So they just gave us one of their 3rds. They're like, here, we still have another one even after we gave it to you to get Jahan Dotson. And then Philly has 4 7th round picks. And so they gave away 2 of them, the 3rd and the 4th one of the 4. And so they're just like, cool, we still have the better of the 2 7th rounders. Y'all take these scraps of these 7th rounders and we're good to go. So the Eagles probably feel really good about this trade right now because they still have a 3rd round pick and still 2 7th round picks after they gave away a 3rd round pick and 2 7ths. They just had 4 to start with. That's crazy. So now the Washington Commanders have a 1st round pick, a 2nd round pick, 2 3rds, a 4th, a 6th, and 2 7ths. That's interesting because I believe we already did not have our 7th round pick for whatever reason. I can't remember exactly why, but now I believe we now have 2 7th round picks total. We went from 0 to 2, I believe, not 1 to 3, but I could be wrong there. So just make sure you fact check me on that. And also shouts out to Grant Paulson. He said, I gotta say, it's kind of nice to have a GM who isn't afraid to make some moves. I agree, man. I mean, Adam Peters put his trade pants on today, shipped a pick for a kicker, and then made a swap in the division that included Jahan Dotson, who a lot of fans were very, very attached to and really believed in. Shouts out to Adam Peters for not being afraid. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, so does this mean Mike Sanford still can at least wear number 1? I wanted him to take number 0 from Marcus Mariota. Remember, Mike Sanford and De'Ami Brown are still sharing that same number 2 right now, which is insane because De'Ami Brown looks like our wide receiver 2 and Mike Sanford already looks like the best corner on this team right now. Why are they sharing a number versus anybody else sharing a number? Both of these guys definitely deserve their own numbers. I've been screaming Mike Sanford snatch that number 0 from Marcus Mariota. That number is too cold for Marcus Mariota to be hogging it like that. But now that De'Ami Brown's gone, I guess Mike Sanford can just go to number 1 if he wants to. I guess if he prefers that, we'll see. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I really appreciate y'all. Of course, this is a heavily opinionated video, so y'all know I can't wait to see what y'all say in the comment section. So of course, please let me know in the comment section if you agree or disagree with any of my points. Bring up any additional points or facts or opinions that I did not bring up, because again, one of the main reasons I even do videos, I make these videos, I even created a YouTube channel, is to become a smarter fan. So if I'm wrong about something or if I forgot about something, please let me know in the comment section. I'm gonna try my best to read and reply to as many comments as possible because I want to become a smarter fan with every video that I make. So I really appreciate y'all. Of course, do not leave this video without leaving a like, and definitely let me know how you feel about this trade. Do you feel like the Commanders won? Who do you feel like won this trade? The Commanders, the Eagles, Jahan Dotson, whoever? Let me know all of the implications. Do you feel like we're gonna go after Brandon Aiyuk now? Do you feel like we already just have an unsung hero on this roster that maybe we don't know, but maybe the Commanders just really believe in somebody? Maybe De'Ami Brown and Luke McCaffrey are better than what we thought, or maybe Olamide is better than we thought. Do you feel like I mentioned earlier, like Mitch Tisler mentioned earlier, do you feel like the Eagles are trying to finesse us? They sent Olamide as a double agent? Who knows? But yeah, man, I really appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.